Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OK Grognard Show. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, the year 2020, 10:30 a.m. Central Time in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Today we're going to have a little D&D campaign discussion. We're going to talk about a little bit about running games on Roll20 using a Discord voice chat, but the important thing here is that what we're going to discuss are utilizing maps available through certain sources. In my case, we're going to talk about using commercial maps available from Dyson Logos on Dyson's dodecahedron blog. Got a little image up there. You can find his maps over on his website, dysonlogos.blog. If you go there, click on maps, and click down, in my case, on commercial maps, you will find many useful maps. Let me bring up a screen. Here we go. If we just make this full screen, that's probably easiest. That way we'll get to see everything. I'm going to bring myself into view here, although I am going to make myself fairly unobtrusive here. I'll adjust the camera a little bit. Hey, who's wearing a GaryCon 11 DMing shirt? Game Master shirt. Always a good time playing and running games at GaryCon. Even virtual GaryCon this year was a very good time. So, once again, go to Dyson Logos, Dyson's dodecahedron, and you'll see there's a map link. Commercial maps are there. That's what page we're on. Excellent. Don't forget to give him a vote. I know a lot of those things go undone. So he updates this pretty regularly. He did just a couple of days ago. He has a full 335 maps currently on his commercial maps page. They're good. They're free for personal and commercial use. If you do use them for commercial purposes, then remember that you have to mention him, and of course credit the map or cartography to Dyson Logos. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I think if you saw what I was doing last week with one of his maps, and I'll pop over there to show this off, and I'm not completely sure how required this is, but you'll notice in the game that I was running last week, I added a notation, maps by Dyson Logos, right there, even on the map. It's unobtrusive. It doesn't hurt to throw that in there. It's not going to ruin your game. It's a way of making sure that he gets credit for what he's created, and that is very important in this day and age. If you want to keep seeing stuff of this high quality shared in this day and age, then make sure you give credit where credit's due. Notice that one level of what I call Hutchins Hideaway was taken from, here, take that off, go here, this page, the Hydra's Ale House. I just twisted it around for my own use on that website. There is an upstairs that I did not include because we didn't really need it for our purposes in that game. There's a basement. In game, I described it as just a root cellar. There really wasn't nothing below here except a bit of storage. I didn't want the game to become bogged down into people searching every nook and cranny for stuff that wasn't there. So rather than show it, rather than create a map for it that people could go to and wander around and spend a lot of time, it was easier just to narratively describe it as a root cellar with nothing there that was worth searching. I described some of the items that were down there, but made sure to mention it in such a way that it was clear that you could spend 2 seconds down there, you could spend the next 3 hours down there searching around. There's nothing to find. Now, sure, that does limit player agency to a certain degree, because a lot of times people would say, well, if they want to spend time searching down there, then let them spend time searching down there. Sure, but at the end of the day, if we spend 3 hours of game time searching in a place where there is nothing to find because I've allowed them to have that kind of overall control over what they're doing in game, are they going to be happy at the end of that 3 hours having spent a lot of time? Could I make stuff up for them to find just because they've searched in a place? Sure. I could have them find something that seems unusual or suggest that it might be something more and let them fiddle with it and use up all sorts of magic, detecting magic and identifying and all the rest of that. But again, at the end of the day, if it isn't anything, why waste the time? Could I make stuff into something? If they insist that they're going to search down there, could I go grab another map and make an entire underworld? Sure. Sure, you could do that. You could make something out of nothing, and sometimes you do in game because it's the best way to spend your time and keep a game exciting and fun. If you want to go full metal sandbox and you want to go full metal random and you don't have something else available, then yeah, you could do stuff on the fly. Maybe they've discovered something you hadn't yet decided was there, and now you're deciding in the moment that there's a hallway or a shaft down to some crazy underworld that you want to create on the fly. You could certainly do that, and I've done similar things to that, and it can be fun. But if you're doing that in-game, be sure you're, as they say, prepared to improvise. Get your tables ready, get your monster books handy, get your various maps handy, generic maps, so that you're ready to give them something visual, exciting, and fairly fleshed out, and to be able to do so quickly so that you're not umming and hawing and rolling dice and making everybody wait when they've put aside several hours of the week to spend on a game, to have some fun, to escape their everyday life, because ultimately That's what they're there for. So, that's one that I've used just recently. But let's look at some of the others. This is a cinder throne, a great example of something that doesn't follow a straight up north, south, east, west axis grid. It's all slightly askew. Some people enjoy having maps that don't fit the usual pattern. If you want to set yourself up with stuff that goes off on all these crazy angles. Now, this is a kind of map that would be more difficult to use at a game table with players who like to map out every little thing. Just trying to describe all of these odd angles would be pretty tough, because you'd spend a lot of time correcting them if they were being very meticulous and pacing everything off and making sure they've got whatever angles. You can always describe in game that whatever you describe, they get to draw any which way they want and consider it good enough. I've sometimes run into players who will want to show you the map and get confirmation that they've done it exactly the way it's supposed to be. And I usually say close enough if it's a little bit off. And I've sometimes said, yeah, well, given your light sources and your mapping equipment and how much time you're spending, which is probably the most important part, what you've come up with there is plenty enough. Now, a map like this, however, in, say, a Roll20 environment, or I dare say a Fantasy Grounds or some other virtual tabletop that has an available fog of war feature, would work pretty well, because they don't actually have to map anything. You might only be showing them a very small section of it at any given time. And because this is where they are, as they are there, they decide to move this way, then that fog of war reveal will follow them as they go along. Of course, they won't see any of this when they're over here, but they'll be able to see as far. Now, of course, you're going to have to take some time to hide certain features, like this secret door over here. You'll have to hide other features, like the secret trap door there. You'll have to be able to reveal that stuff at certain points. So maybe you put this there and get rid of all of this and create something on your map layer in Roll20. And I'll speak primarily to Roll20 since that's what I'm using these days. Maybe you'll put this down on the GM's layer as a circle with an S in it, and then reveal that object up to the map layer when they've searched and found that secret door, secret trap door. And then you'll set this whole area up over here as a separate map and move those players over. And I can show something of that here, right? Because when these players were up here, and let me move them back over here. When these players were up here, this is what they saw when they finally moved down to here. Then we revealed that map, and we had them all set up in there. course, when they came down through a hole, and they were over in this section, and then they fought these creatures. And then, of course, they discovered this because the shaman tried to make his escape through there. And then, of course, at that point, once they had said they were heading down to the next level map was revealed. They fought these giant frogs, and the shaman down on this level found this chest over here, which I think if you recall from a previous video, I never did do as I should have and move that from the GM layer to the token layer, right? And that's where that was. And one of the neat things about this is you've got a whole section here where you can make notes about what's in that chest. And you can add other things. Now, of course, this object is just a chest, so most of this dynamic lighting and a lot of these advanced features are not necessary for that. But you may want to add some notes in there that, I think there were 20 gems worth 100 GP each. And you can save that note in there. And that way you can go and check it out in game to remind yourself about what's in there. Easy enough. Getting back to this map. And again, this whole section here should be a separate map. This whole section here is below the stairs. You might want to have the upper map include just the start of the stairs, and then have the lower map include up to the door. So when you're moving people from map to map, you're working them over like that. Now this space on here, let's switch over to another map. I think we get the gist of that. Alright. The simplest maps, of course, are like the one that I used, that tavern map, which you can resize so it fits the regular grid that's already available on Roll20. Now you can resize the playing board on Roll20 to be much larger than what would accommodate like the single floor of a tavern, so that it can accommodate much larger maps, and then you'll have to resize them to fit all of that. You can have pages in your Roll20 campaign where the players don't actually move their characters around or tokens, and just have them as maps like this that are players' handouts, or you can put them in as pages on your campaign, so that you can easily click through and refer to it each time. That way everybody sees it when you're discussing it, rather than have people have to all run and grab a handout and refer to it at the same time and not be able to point and direct them to look at specific places. So, for instance, it's great that I can just bring this up, and then if it's of a certain size, I can move around with the cursor and say, okay, so you guys have entered the town. You notice there's a tavern over here. There's a small shrine over here. There's a well up ahead in a square. Most of the rest of these buildings look like residential buildings, although some of them have small shops in the fronts of them. They ask you what shops. You've got a list nearby. You say, there's a this, there's a that, there's a butcher, there's a candlestick maker. They say, well, which one's the butcher? We want to get some food. Okay, well, this one over here. You refer to your own key, a separate map probably. and say, there's the butcher right there, across from the horse farm. What? Wait, why is it so near the horses? We could talk about what's in this tree if they want to explore it. Of course, they can check farms on the outskirts before they come in. Ultimately, though, they may want to go to the keep, talk to the noble up there. Perhaps this over here is several barracks and a little military post for most of the guards that are around town, because they want all of them living in the keep. That would get a little crowded for the noble family. We go down to the docks. Well, there's a couple of warehouses. There's a few fishing concerns down along the shoreline. Over here, looks like there's a boat being constructed. Looks like it's almost ready to launch. Yeah, from out there, we can see there's some building. What's that over there on the island? Well, there's a lighthouse over there. There's this. There's a ferry here that brings people to and fro across the river. Plenty of little details that you can add in on the fly. And it's nice to have that. And this is one of those situations where this can be more about what the players are suggesting, because they know what it is they want to do for the most part. In most games, when they return to a town or get to a new settlement, there are certain things that they need already. So-and-so had his shield sundered during a previous game, or two of the player characters had mounts, and two of the others do not, and want to make sure that they're not slowing down the party, so they're going to pick up horses while they're in town here. So they're going to suggest certain things that they're looking for, and you can take up those suggestions as the points to consider when you're telling them what they see and what's immediately available. Now, that is not to say that you can't go through and delineate an entire list of possibilities. But for the most part, you're going to know that the players have an idea what it is they want, and you're also going to have recalled things that they've mentioned in passing during the course of previous games. And perhaps you recall somebody saying, I wish I'd have bought some rope. You can do something as simple as say, yeah, if you're picking up any rope in town, it costs this much. There's a general store. You don't have to spend any time there, but if you want to just grab some rope, just mark off this amount from your character sheet. Or perhaps you don't even spend time in the system you're using, regardless of what it is, on small amounts of coin, and you just want to say, all right, well, everybody spends a certain amount, and you get food and lodgings for the 2-3 days you're planning on staying here. You can also grab a handful of mundane items. That rope bill that you suggested you wished you'd had, you pick up 50 feet of that, or 100 if you prefer. You tell me, write it down. If you keep track of things like that in your game, then make sure that when they're in town and they're picking these things up, that they keep careful track of them, because if you've said it and then later on they haven't actually gotten those things, and that's important to the way you run games, then fair warning has been given when they were actually in town and they had that opportunity. Now, we're not looking to create gotcha moments. They happen sometimes, but let's hope we're not going out of our way and spending a bunch of our time and energy to try to cheat a player out of being able to deal with a situation during an adventure because they didn't scrawl out that they carried 3 more iron spikes, and suddenly your adventure evening comes to a halt. Game session comes to a halt for lack of a nail. The shoe was lost. For lack of a shoe, the horse was lost. For lack of a horse, the battle was lost. For lack of a battle, victory. The war was lost. That kind of stuff can snowball, and I don't know. Personally, I don't find it a whole lot of fun when a DM decides that these little things are going to completely stall a game or throw it completely out of whack. Your mileage may vary. Looking at some of these there's both a colorized and non-colorized version of that. Now, something that can be fun is, I think, and I haven't tested this out yet, but I think that mazes actually become a lot more viable in virtual tabletop situations like with Roll20 than they do when you're playing face-to-face and mapping at the table. I will see about that, though, but it's definitely a series, a situation I'd like to test sometime in the not-too-distant future. Because if that Fog of War works pretty well, you could have incredibly huge maze for people to go around. Now, the risk is that there's not enough interesting stuff within the maze because, sure, left turn, right turn, left turn, right turn, here's an intersection with an obelisk. Okay, now we're somewhere. Is it going to help us get in or out of the maze? I don't know. Maybe. Now, Games Master's Vault. Easier at the table, but for a full-on maze, I am thinking on a VTT it would be easier. Game Master's Vault, who just jumped in here, suggesting that Fog of War would work better face-to-face. Well, I don't know. Maybe you've done both, Game Master's Vault. Personally, I only have experience at the game table for the most part. Virtual tabletops are new for me. But if I can load up a, let's say to scale, 2,000 foot by 2,000 foot maze and can run it with Fog of War on Roll20 and put enough stuff in the maze to make it interesting too. Interesting. Okay. Game Master's Vault says, I never bother with Fog of War. If the players see my boards, they see my boards. They still have to defeat whatever obstacles I put down for them to overcome. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people run games different ways. Some people enjoy the caller and mapping aspect that old school play engenders. Others like, let's say 4th edition D&D, where it's more of a matter of going from scene to scene and having tactical combats on battle mats where physical obstacles are all delineated and the creatures are all laid out. And sure, some might be invisible or there might be some other intangible obstacles like that, but it becomes more of a minis thing. Now you're saying, not saying my way is right, just how it works for me. And what do you run, Game Master's Vault? Just to clarify some of what you're saying. You're running what RPG system, for instance? These days, not necessarily having only or only ever run a particular one, but what are you running these days? A couple of homebrew campaigns using Pathfinder. Okay. Now, my experience with Pathfinder is that it's very player character focused and also skills focused and combat focused, at least in the ones I've run. Do you focus on those things yourself, or do you use Pathfinder in a way where it's more narrative and theater of the mind? And believe me, any system, of course, can be used with a heavy focus on tactical combat or a heavy focus on narrative theater of the mind type play and role playing and no combat at all. Certainly, you can run any system any which way. I'm just asking for clarification. Of all the stuff for other RPGs, D&D, COC, have the most books for Pathfinder 1. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And do you mainly do, well, it's just PF1 rule set. My campaigns are only about 30% combat. Role play, plot heavy. Yeah, real good. Um, you run some games online too, of course. Do me a favor and throw a link to your channel into the voice chat there, along with a quick schedule, delineating when you stream games that you run too, so that anybody who catches up with this in the next couple of weeks before Twitch deletes it will be able to see in the voice chat section where they can go to check out some of your Pathfinder games. It's a fun system. I ran a lot of 3.x games. Not really online for the games. We're playing over Discord now with COVID-19. Yeah. Yeah. So you do a lot of Discord chat, voice chat only, or do you do visual stuff too? Do you do do you use a whiteboard in conjunction with it, or is it straight up narrating the combats and just using voice chats? Oh. Okay. Let me check something else here real quick. Well, I don't know what you posted, whether it was a picture or a URL, but I'm afraid Twitch has decided to turn it into 3 asterisks. so it goes. Craft my own terrain, so I have a cam on for your players. Okay, hey, that's cool. So you do a lot of crafting with the terrain and stuff, and create physical set pieces for the miniatures. Do you also paint up figures for the players? YouTube for Game Master's Vault. Okay, cool. Hey, you know what? I'm going to search it myself currently. Maybe it just doesn't allow visitors to the channel to post that. Oh yeah, of course, Game Master's Vault. I've watched so many of your videos. I'm going to post up. Did you recognize the intro music there? Let's see if I can put a post or post a URL to your YouTube channel so people have it handy. Yeah, there we go. So it'll allow me to do it. Are you a follower on the channel here? On the Twitch channel? Maybe that has something to do with it. I'm wondering now if you're a follower on the Twitch channel, if you're allowed. Worked for you? Looked like it worked for you? Yeah, you're a follower. Okay. I thought you were. Yeah, okay. Well, maybe you're seeing your own, but I'll tell you what. From my view of the Twitch channel, it only showed 3 asterisks where you tried to post it. But it's there, and I've posted it, so we know it's there, and that's good. Pathfinder. It's been years since I've run any Pathfinder. I didn't run it. Obviously, nobody ran it during 3.0 because it wasn't around then, but late in the 3.5 era, of course, and then on through 4th edition D&D, and even today, people are still running 1st edition Pathfinder. I'm not sure if Pathfinder Society has full-on moved to Pathfinder 2.0 now. Yeah, 3.75 D&D is basically what they call Pathfinder. There are a few cosmetic differences. Certainly there's some streamlining, I think, of certain skills. Most notably, like search skills, right? And perception checks, things like that, right? Got streamlined in Pathfinder from 3.5. I'm gonna adjust this camera since I'm kicking back a little more. So map-wise, let me ask you, since you're here, still plenty of Pathfinder Society games for PF1. Okay, I think all the new stuff is PF2 though. They still also have Starfinder Society, right? Yep, I've got a number of friends who love Starfinder as a new system for science fiction role-playing games. Are you a person who creates maps yourself, or do you pick them up? Do you just mostly play through adventures created for the systems of choice, or do you do a lot of homebrew stuff? Don't use maps, it's theater of the mind until combat is initiated, then I use my terrain. Okay. So all of the environments that the players are in are ones that you've described, and then ones that they see only in close combat then. I guess I've got another question for you though. How much of this stuff do you keep track of yourself? Is it all in your head? Do you have personal maps so that you can know where in the world everything is? I mean, obviously, maps are primarily information. They're about scaled interpretation of our world or a world, and help you keep track of where things are in relationship to one another. Now all of that can be done narratively. You have GM maps, okay. If a player makes a map, and this is something we were discussing a little bit earlier in this broadcast, if a player decides they want to keep track of what you're telling them with a map, how much time do you spend on that in-game? World and city town maps is about it, though. Ah, for your own. Okay. So if somebody says, I want to make a map for my own edification of where this is and where that is in town, do you tend to sidestep that, saying, you know what, if you need to know where all this stuff is, you do, and we will just say that your character has made that map, and if it becomes important in game, like you want to sell that map or give it to somebody else or describe where something is, you have that knowledge? Is it enough to narratively? Players get those maps eventually, though. Okay. So if you have a map of a town, then when the players have explored it enough or spent enough time there, you then just allow them to see the map that you have, right? And I assume there's not any real secret information on it. Give it to them so the players know. Sometimes the characters purchase the maps. Oh, there you go. And there's no secret information on your GM maps such that you'd have to redact them to any real degree, I guess, huh? Nothing overly tactical or secret about the maps. Cool. Now, are all these maps of your own design? Or are you somebody who grabs stuff where you can find it and bends it, shapes it to fit your own world concept, and then utilize whatever you can get your hands on? The Blind Lamia's Cave. That's kind of cool. Pretty simple. Pretty straightforward. Notice he's not using the cross-hatching. Pardon me, I'm narrating a little bit as I look through these Dyson Logos commercial maps. There's another nice little inn to use. Towers. Spectres Towers. Towers are so much fun. Grab it off Google searches and say it's just for my use, not to use any kind of commercial product. Temple Walk. Let me ask you too, since I've got you here. I often have to Photoshop the town map, for example, to add my names for those shops, etc. Let me ask you, you say it's mostly theater of the mind. Is there a lot of dungeon crawling in your adventuring, or does most of it take place above the surface? Most of it's towns and interiors of buildings, but nevertheless not a lot of... I'm going down in a dungeon. There's a 10-foot corridor. There's 2 doors on the left, 1 on the right, 1 down the end. What do you do next? Blah, 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 that sort of thing. Trying to be Emperor Bones. Sounds crazy. Let's have a closer look at that one. And this is the grid one. He has them without grids too. That goes down. That goes down. That goes down. Down, down, down. So this whole section here is below the level of this. So we actually have 1, 2 levels. And this, assumably, is either slanted down below this, such that this water can pool up. We don't know how deep that is, though. Not a whole lot of dungeon crawling, says Game Master's Vault. They've spent some time in the Underdark. Okay. My plot is a planet-sprawling political mystery kind of game. Oh, okay. So you'd like a good plot. You set up adventure plots, plot hooks that a lot of NPC interactions, sure. Do you do you have overarching ideas about what would go on in the world if the players did not interact with it, and then make those adjustments to what would happen based on how they interact with it then? Is that a fair way to describe what you call plotting, or what you envision as a plot for your world? I have plot hooks that my players haven't figured out yet after over 2 years. Nifty. Planting Easter eggs. Okay. So, no one watches my show. Do you want to do you want to throw a little Easter egg in here that they haven't found? Reveal one. See if they see if they're paying attention to other places for these things. Oh, these are neat. So he did a whole series of sewer things that you can use. These sewer connections are just long stretches of sewers that have little offshoot places. And if you wanted to put them together, here's one section, here's another section, and then we can use, say, one of these long pieces to connect this here to this here, or these sewer elements here, some more over here, and then of course there are a number of sections like this here, and all of it can be used in conjunction with things, maps like this. Planting Easter eggs. The dragons are actually behind the whole thing. Well, that's a big one. Why did you say that? Behind the whole thing. I almost feel bad now that I asked, because if that gets out, they'll know everything. I guess the important thing is once they know more or know everything, what do they actually do about it? Because therein lies the important part of the campaign, right? All right, I'm going to read it. I had one Easter egg that took the players over 6 months of real time to figure out. Okay, they know this one already. It was a giant anchor they saw in a nautical shop along the coast in the town they started in. It took them 6 months to figure out that the anchor was actually from a crashed airship that they've been investigating. Nifty. It took them a while. Well, when they put it together, the beauty part of any kind of Easter egg like that is once they realize the connections between two different things, whether it's something they've known for a while or it's something they've just discovered and connected to something they've known for a while, once they put the two and two together, it certainly creates a dimension to a campaign world that takes it sometimes in new directions. At least mentally, people think of it as a larger world when there are connections that they don't when things are just linear and they're just moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing with no way of looking back and having anything they've done in the past be relevant to things that they are doing now or things that they might do in the future. I think it fleshes out a campaign world in ways that if you only play games, say, at conventions or at game days, those kinds of connections never get made. So it becomes more about playing in the moment, which is fun. In a lot of ways, that can be very rewarding, but it doesn't have the same longevity that playing in a campaign. And even if it's a campaign where people only get together a few times a year, once a year, whatever, that can be just as fun as a weekly campaign, especially if it's the right players, right? Well, Game Master's Vault, we're getting close in on the hour, and I generally run these things for about an hour and go over stuff. Oh, there's another thing I should mention about Dyson's. Yeah, to stretch things out, so Game Master's Vault. My players wanted an open-ended game, yeah. So we've been playing over 2 years, and they are only level 9. Only level 9. And Pathfinder, yeah, that's 3.x era games. It's not uncommon to run games on up to 20th level and sometimes beyond. I think the highest level campaign I ran in that era was a 3.5 game where the players were actually 17th and 18th level when we kind of had our finale. Yeah, milestones are great. There's certainly plenty of campaigns, even when using 3.0, 3.5 Pathfinder, where I just I wanted to move on to something that would have required the players to have higher level characters, so I would just say, yep, go ahead and level up, run something else, and then at the end of it, even though it was a short thing, say, yeah, move everybody advance another level. And then, instead of running 3rd level stuff, now I'm running 5th level stuff. True, easier for the players and the GM just to say, you're up there. Also, I think for a lot of experienced players, certain systems are more fun once you reach certain milestones, certain levels. I've had more than one group that has expressed an interest in starting beyond 1st level, whether it was let's all have at least 2nd level characters or 3rd level characters. Some groups that wanted to play. The one I just started up, the characters in my face-to-face campaign that I'd just been running for a little over a year had reached around 7th, in some case 8th level, running a 1st edition AD&D campaign. And I was moving online and continuing to run 1st edition, and a number of the players were the same, but I want to keep open the possibility that if this whole world nightmare disappears, we can go back to that, and those characters will still be available to them. I don't want what happens online, on the other hand, to be just some sort of a dream sequence that we have to completely erase if we ever get back, because I've only got about half of the players available for the online game as were available for the tabletop game. If we get back to the tabletop game, a lot of them, probably all of them, all but one, maybe two, will be available. again, and we had 8-9 players in that game. So we have I've set them up currently with 5th level pre-gen characters so that they can enjoy a certain amount of uh, gameplay that they've already enjoyed without having to start completely from scratch. It's a couple. Dreams are fun, and I've done similar games like that, but I don't want to just wash an entire 3, 4, 6 months away. It may be some time before everybody's available again to play face to face. So Game Master's Vault says I use Dreams with. First said Dreams are a fun tool though. I use Dreams with one of my players. It is her goddess's way of conveying messages to her without actually interfering with the world. Yeah, well, it's really a shorthand for the GM to be able to pass information to the players that would be inconvenient to do, shall we say, at a street level. Yeah, I miss our players around the table too. But looking at the time, as we close in on the hour, I'm going to say once again, thanks to everybody who's watching this, whether you're here in Twitch, as Game Master's Vault is. Thank you very much, by the way. Or if you're catching it later on YouTube, I appreciate it. We got to spend a little time looking at some of Dyson's maps, and we'll get back to that again. I will say that scheduling is such for this channel on 10:30 a.m. Central Time every day from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. On Tuesday and Friday, we do a little board gaming, mostly using Tabletopia as a virtual tabletop and Discord for voice chat. On Wednesday, campaign discussion as we did today. Tune in if you like this. Tune in again on Mondays for sure. We'll do some cartography and world building. It's often very much like what we're doing here today. Saturdays, we review a cartoon. We are going to be up to the 5th episode of the D&D animated series this week, so just a few days from now, join us for that. We announce a weekly winner for a dice set, and I should tell you, Game Master's Vault, that you are in for the drawing for this week. All you have to do to be a part of that is show up in the voice chat during one of the streams and chime in, and make sure you're a follower of the channel, because that's a requirement too. Otherwise, no purchase necessary. Yay, you indeed. You're in the Twin Cities. Beautiful. The other birthplace of D&D. Nice. Have you been down for a GaryCon yet? Game Master's Vault? When it gets back to not being virtual and being physical again. Yep, okay. So you know how wonderful that is. I wonder, do you get to GameOCon in Madison in November's too? That's a lot of fun, and there's a big Pathfinder contingent there as well for society play, but also for all sorts of play, right? I haven't only went to Gen Con this last year because it was paid for. Good for you. It's nice when people pay for stuff for you. And you know what? If you're running games for the society while you're there, or you're running events, or you're there helping some company push their products and run demos for them and stuff, more power to you. If you're in a position to allow them to help you with the paying for traveling there or paying for your hotel stay and all of that. Yeah, the small cons are the best cons. I agree. Press Pass, there you go. How to be a great GM channel. Beautiful. We'll have to make sure that we check that out later too, the how to be a great GM channel. If anybody's listening and wants more tips on how to do it right. And with that, we'll close out the show as we hit the 1 hour mark. Thank you very much again, Game Masters Vault. Be sure to check out that YouTube channel. Lots of good content over there to drink in. And we will catch you again soon. Thanks.